Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome all of you in the Václav Havel Library. And because there are so many important people, forgive me, I have this piece of paper. I am glad we host today the event marking the 10th anniversary of an unjust imprisonment of Professor Ilham Tohti, laureate of the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize. And it's my great pleasure to welcome our two distinguished guests, Ms. Jewher Ilham and Mr. Enver Can. Thank you for coming to Prague. I would also like to welcome other honorable guests, Ambassador of the United States of America, Mr. Bijan Sabet, Ambassador of Germany, Mr. Andreas Kuhne, Ambassador of Canada, Madame Emily McLaughlin, Ambassador of Korea, Mr. Yang Hong, and Mr. Jaromír Beránek, Chairman of the Committee for Foreign and European Affairs of the City of Prague, representing Deputy Mayor Zdeněk Hřib. We appreciate very much the close cooperation and partnership with the American Embassy and their kind support of this event. Thank you, Excellency. Last but not least, I would like to thank moderator Kateřina Procházková and the Sinologist project for the partnership and cooperation, and Ondřej Klimeš, Sinologist and Uygurist from the Oriental Institute of the Czech Academy of Science for his participation in this evening. Now allow me to give the floor to moderator Kateřina Procházková and enjoy the evening.
1, 2, 3. Joachim, thank you very much Mr. Doppel, for your introduction. And good evening, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's such an honor for me to be here today and lead the debate that's called Free Ilham Tohti, an evening for Ilham Tohti. This evening is held under the auspices of the Vice President of Czech Senate, Mr. Oberfalzer, and the Deputy Mayor, Mr. Zdeněk Hřib. Both of them can't be today with us due to their illnesses, so we are sending best regards. But I'm so pleased and honored to invite the American Ambassador to the Czech Republic, His Excellency Bijan Sabet, to say a few words. Excellency, floor is yours.
So I also have some written remarks because it's a very esteemed audience as well. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Václav Havel Library Board of Trustees, my fellow ambassador colleagues, and it is really a pleasure to be here for this extremely meaningful event. Today, we gather to honor the unwavering spirit of prominent Uyghur scholar Ilham Tohti, who has been unjustly imprisoned in the People's Republic of China for the past decade. I am very glad that Tohti's daughter, Jewher, is able to join us this evening. Ilham Tohti, a leading Uyghur intellectual and activist, dedicated his life and career to advocating for the rights and well-being of Uyghurs. This is a deeply important cause, particularly as PRC authorities continue to carry out genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. His noble work sadly came at a high cost. Tohti was unjustly sentenced to life imprisonment in 2014 on charges of separatism, despite his tireless efforts to promote dialogue, understanding, and peaceful coexistence, especially with members of other ethnic groups. It is crucial for us to recognize the significance of Tohti's plight and how it connects to historic struggles faced by other great visionaries cherished by our nations. Today, I join my fellow Americans in celebrating the birthday of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., which is a national holiday in the United States. Gathering in this beautiful library, I am also reminded of the inspiring legacy of another heroic leader, the late President Václav Havel. Tohti's story echoes the struggle faced by Dr. King, a visionary who fought against racial discrimination and advocated for civil rights in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s. Dr. King, like Tohti, championed social justice and equality for all, using peaceful methods to change systemic racism and injustice. Their determination to challenge oppression and promote unity in the face of adversity serves as a testament to the power of perseverance. Similarly, late President Václav Havel fought against totalitarianism in this country. Havel stood up against the repression of the communist regime in then Czechoslovakia, using his art and dissenting voice to advocate for freedom, human rights, and democracy, the cornerstone of the Czech foreign policy today. Havel's message of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of peaceful resistance is just as relevant as it was during his time. By drawing parallels between the unjust imprisonment of Ilham Tohti, the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., and the indomitable spirit of Václav Havel, we shed light on the broader struggle for freedom, justice, and human rights around the world, including for members of marginalized racial, ethnic, religious, and indigenous groups. The imprisonment of Ilham Tohti serves as a reminder of the ongoing challenges faced by intellectuals, artists, activists, marginalized and underserved communities globally. Peaceful dissent is not a crime. In fact, in many cases, it is a duty. So it is our collective responsibility to stand in solidarity in calling for the immediate and unconditional release of Tohti from prison, which the US government has continued to demand. I commend the Czech government for your advocacy on behalf of Ilham Tohti. So let us use this opportunity to not only honor the courage of Ilham Tohti, but also to reaffirm our commitment to strive for a world where human rights are universally respected. As the late Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So together we can raise our voices collectively, demanding for justice and freedom for all, and ultimately pave the way for a brighter, more inclusive future. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for touching opening speech. And now let me welcome and invite here as well, Mr. Jaromír Beránek, the chairman of the International Relations Committee of the Prague City Assembly. Please, Mr. Jaromír.
It's going to be very difficult and maybe a little bit humiliating to speak after Mr. Sabet, but please allow me also to tell a few words on behalf of the city of Prague and its deputy mayor and former mayor Zdeněk Hřib, who unfortunately couldn't be here today due to his sickness. Your Excellencies, dear Václav Havel Library, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me welcome you and convey the warmest greetings of Mr. Zdeněk Hřib, the Deputy Mayor of Prague. Thank you for the invitation to today's event, where we commemorate the sad 10-year anniversary of the show trial where prominent Uyghur academician Ilham Tohti was sentenced to life in prison, being guilty of merely supporting the dialogue and understanding between the Uyghur minority and the majority Chinese society. Professor Tohti is unfortunately one of the many victims of the Chinese totalitarian regime, which does not allow for the pluralism of opinion and which is indifferent to the values of liberal democracy and respect for human rights as we cherish in the Czech Republic. As the city of Prague, we have indeed plenty of experience with how the Chinese regime works. After we terminated the sister agreement between Prague and Beijing during the last electorate term, we faced immediate threats from the Chinese side as well as an ostensible retribution in the form of the persecution of artistic groups that had nothing to do with our decision. This experience demonstrated quite clearly that Beijing did not see the signing of the partnership agreement with the city of Prague as an opportunity to expand our mutual cooperation, but rather as a way to spread its own propaganda. It showed us that China is an unreliable partner that will not hesitate to sacrifice any agreement if political necessity demands it. Withdrawing from the sister agreement was an important step by which we demonstrated, among other things, that Prague cannot and will not turn a blind eye to Beijing's failure to uphold human rights. It is this very violation of human rights that strongly affects the Uyghur minority in China. As the United Nations High Commissioner's report has sadly confirmed, the torture, sterilization, and sexual abuse of Uyghurs is still taking place in China. China's long-term goal is to systematically undermine the traditions and religious practices of Uyghurs, and thus to de facto erase their culture and history. Haven't we heard similar stories before? In 2021, Mr. Zdeněk Hřib provided his mayoral patronage to the World Uyghur Congress, which took place in Prague, and where he met with several survivors of the Chinese detention centers. We should all be deeply concerned by that fact that there are still concentration camps in China in 2024, where the Chinese regime is detaining hundreds of thousands of its own citizens. We are all in particular shocked by the horrifying reports of forced harvestings of organs from prisoners. These issues need to be constantly brought up, and Chinese officials should be confronted with them at every opportunity. From the moment Mr. Hřib was elected the mayor of the Czech capital in 2018, he worked to fulfill his promise that he made to voters. This was to return to the Havlovian tradition of respect for democracy and human rights, and advocating this in foreign relations and affairs. I can probably say on behalf of the whole Prague government that we intend to continue to do so further on, particularly in relation to China. In conclusion, I would like to thank you once again for the invitation and emphasize that Prague was, is, and will be a safe place for Uyghurs, where they will always be welcome. I wish you all, ladies and gentlemen, a wonderful and inspirational evening, and to Mr. Sabet and maybe also others, a very decent celebration of their national holidays. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beránek. And now let me introduce our distinguished guest speakers. First, it's my great pleasure to welcome Madam Jewher Ilham, Ilham's Tohti daughter, who herself is a well-known advocate and also a project coordinator at the organization Worker Rights Consortium. Pleasure having you here, Jewher. Thank you for coming. Let me also introduce and welcome here Enver Can, Ilham's Tohti defender and president of the IlhamTohti Initiative. Enver, pleasure to have you here as well. And Dr. Ondřej Klimeš, sinologist and Uyghur expert from the Oriental Institute of the Academy of Science, is our third speaker. Ondřej, pleasure having you on the board. Let me also introduce myself. My name is Kateřina Procházková and I'm working for Project Synopsis. So let me now say a few words maybe about Ilham Tohti that were not said maybe before here. Ilham Tohti is a publicly well-known Uyghur intellectual, economist, and a laureate of 10 international human rights awards. The Václav Havel Human Rights Prize from 2019, among others. Sakharov Prize, if I'm right as well. He also has been a candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize, including this year, 2024. And for over than 20 years, he has been engaged in developing dialogue and understanding between the Uyghurs people and Chinese. And for this, he was sentenced to life prison in a 2-day show trial in 2014. There is no official information about his health conditions or physical conditions. Tohti's wife, Madame Gilzener, was not able, or anyone from the family, was not able to visit him for the past 7 years. And today, sadly, we are here to commemorate 10 years since his imprisonment. So let me start maybe with a question that might seem like obvious question, but Jewher, where is your father? Where is Ilham Tohti now? And how is he? Please.
When my father was sentenced to life imprisonment, he was assigned to be serving his sentence in Urumqi First Prison, Urumqi, which is the capital city of the Uyghur region. However, as you mentioned earlier, Katarina, that my family members have had no news of him since 2017. We do not know if he has been transferred to another prison or another detention facility or to a factory to work under forced labor conditions. We don't know. It is very unpredictable. The Chinese government's behaviors are often unpredictable, and the Chinese government has refused to have my families to have their visiting rights, although they publicly claimed, according to the UN Human Rights Special Rapporteurs, that they have claimed my father has a right, but that is not the case. According to the Chinese constitutional law, political prisoners have the rights to be visited by their family members every month, but it has not been the case for my family. He was allowed to be visited every 3 months after he received his sentence, and it stopped in 2017. The last time when we heard from him, we've learned that within a few months of detention, he had lost over 40 pounds. He was denied food twice, each time for over 10 days. He was shackled, chained both over his wrists and his ankles. And he was beaten in the prison. He was forced to eat pork, eat non-halal food. That's one of the reasons why he was resulted in denying for food for 10 days. Now, no one knows where he is, what his current condition is, or if he is even alive. Although as a daughter, I would like to believe that he is alive, and I do believe that he is alive. And I hope that he's being patient and that he will wait for all of us to, help with getting him released. I hope that day comes soon.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Jewher, but that's what is happening now in PRC, and thank you very much for witnessing and sharing this information with us. Enver, I have maybe one question to you, because I was mentioning and introducing a bit Ilham Tohti, but could you tell us more about him? You worked for him for a long time, you established the Ilham Tohti initiative, so why did you establish this initiative and why are you doing what you are doing?
Thank you. Thank you. Before answering your question, I would like to repeat the gratitude of all Uyghurs to the Czech people, to the jury to choose Ilham Tohti for the Václav Havel Award, which was a source of hope for my oppressed people. And also, I thank the library for hosting this event to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Ilham Tohti's detention. Personally, I left my homeland as a child 62 years ago and have been living in Germany for the last 50 years. I don't know Ilham Tohti personally and never met him, but his courage, bravery, braveness, and vision was the inspiration for me to give up my position in the World Uyghur Congress, which I am a potential co-founder. With the help of some European friends, we established the IlhamTohti Initiative in 2016 in Munich. As some Chinese intellectuals called him Mandela of Uyghurs, Ilham Tohti was someone who we needed in a very crucial time of history. It was just after 9/11 terrorist attacks which China tried to misuse it and joined, apparently, the US international campaign against terrorism. At this stage, Ilham Tohti, with his wisdom and realistic proposals, and preach for peace, coexistence, ethnic harmony, and rule of law, convinced widespread audiences in China, including Han intellectuals, and also the world community, that we Uyghurs were victims of the Chinese state terrorism. Thus, as on 23rd of September 2014, Ilham Tohti was sentenced for life in prison. Dr. Teng Biao, a Chinese lawyer, said the Uyghur scholar deserved the Nobel Peace Prize, not prison in life. So, as China, instead of utilizing Ilham Tohti's most realistic proposals to stabilize the region, sought to silence him behind the bars. Ilham Tohti and his ideas had to be promoted in international fora, and efforts should be made for his release. And that's why I stepped in to do something.
Thank you very much, Enver, and thank you for mentioning World Uyghur Congress that you were co-founder and founder and father of, that I forgot to mention. And as was said, Mayor Hřib at the time was supporting the World Uyghur Congress here 2 years ago. We are now talking about the situation of one person, and it's not just one person in Uyghur region, but maybe, Ondřej, if I may have a question now for you. Could you maybe tell us, we are talking about the story of Professor Tohti, but maybe could you summarize or tell us what is actually happening, or describe the situation of the Uyghurs and other minorities in Uyghur region? Thank you.
Very much for the question. Good evening, everybody, and thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this debate. It is my pleasure to meet Jewher in person finally, and again, it's my great pleasure, as always, to work with Enver Can again. I think Professor Ilham Tohti's case is very important and excitingly interesting from many aspects. So I believe we will talk about it more. To answer your question, I think that there are several ways we can look at what's happening in the Uyghur region, or in the Xinjiang, so-called Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. In several governments and institutions of democratic countries have declared their view that what's going on in there can be regarded as genocide. There is a similar statement by the UN and also I think Human Rights Watch that what's happening there can be termed or is susceptible to be called crimes against humanity. There is a pretty solid agreement in scholarly community which was I think cemented by the way last November here on a Uyghur Studies conference where we've met here with quite a few scholar friends, and everybody seemed to agree that the system in Xinjiang and Tibet and Inner Mongolia can also be called colonial arrangement, settler colonialism, which always or very often involves coerced destruction of indigenous communities, forced assimilations, genocides. So colonialism is another term. Everybody also, or colleagues from research circles also, we all seem to agree that there is a cultural genocide going on. No one has disputed it, even though some people would not agree with the use of the word genocide, but they do agree that cultural genocide is going on. Systematic efforts to assimilate Uyghurs and to Sinnify them.
Thank you. We know about a growing repression and forced assimilation that you mentioned. You mentioned the culture, or I would say genocide that is happening now, or crimes against humanity, forced labor that was mentioned as well, and Jewher is working on the subject a lot. Cultural assurance, colonialism. But maybe can you be more specific and tell me how is the situation for Uyghurs right now in Xinjiang? What is happening to them? And actually it's a question for all of my speakers, guests.
As earlier panelists mentioned, that there are egregious human rights abuses that's taken place in my homeland, the Uyghur region, which many call constitutes to crimes against humanity, and some consider this as genocide. I personally believe it. There's no better term than genocide that can describe what's happening in my region. First, we're talking about the forced displacement of the Uyghur children, where after their parents are being sent to re-education centers, into prisons, those kids have been sent to state-run orphanages, where they have to grow up speaking Han Chinese only, forgetting their own mother tongue, without have the access to practice their religion or learn anything about their culture. They grow up becoming Han Chinese. The only thing that will relate them to the Uyghurs is how they look. But anything else, anything that makes them the Uyghur will be completely wiped out from their identity. And on top of that, we also have learned from reports that Uyghur women have been subjected to gender-based sexual harassments and forced sterilizations. So women who have been detained in those detention facilities have constantly reported that they have faced sexual harassments by the guards, by the police, or by the officials, even if there are investigations that's supposed to be done, nothing concrete will be coming out of those so-called investigations, and there's no consequences for those who have perpetrated those actions. And with the birth rate of the Uyghur region had dropped over 24% in one single year. And that really indicates the Chinese government's means to really crack down on this population and prevent from future generations from being born. And also with the encouragement of migration for Han Chinese people into the Uyghur region, that really diluted the population, Uyghur population of the Uyghur region, making the Uyghur region less of a Uyghur region. So the full name of the Uyghur region in Chinese is Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. What do we hear here? The Uyghur word is the key word, but what is the other term that rings the bell? Autonomous. That's the key word. But does it sound like Uyghurs have any autonomy in the region? Well, first, autonomy means that Uyghurs will be running the government, local government, and will have some sense of self-governance, but that is not the case in the Uyghur region. Uyghur individuals are not running the local governments. In fact, most of the former officials, that's Uyghur officials or higher positioned Uyghur people or the elite of the society have all been subjected to detention, whether it's being sent to re-education centers to be re-educated because they have possibly have their minds polluted by extremist thoughts or separatist thoughts, or they have been sent to prison with a fake trial like what my father received, or no trial at all. There's no due process or rule of law in the Uyghur region. And Uyghur people have been also subjected to forced labor, as we mentioned earlier, where Uyghurs are not only working in factories across the entire region, but also shipped out of their homes to mainland China in cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, Beijing,